May 4th, 1945. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, Reims, France. General Dwight D. Eisenhower sits at his desk, reviewing the final German surrender protocols alongside his chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith. The war in Europe is all but over. Days remain, perhaps only hours. The Third Reich is collapsing from every direction. For the first time in years, the end feels real. This nightmare is almost over, Eisenhower thinks. The door opens. A staff officer steps in, holding a field report. His posture is rigid, his expression tense. Smith takes a document, scans it quickly, and then pauses. His face changes. "Sir," Smith says carefully, "we have a situation involving Third Army." Eisenhower looks up from the surrender papers. Patton is in Linz. Eisenhower blinks. "Linz? That's in Austria." "Yes, sir." Smith nods once. 80 miles past his designated stop line, and Soviet forces are roughly 30 miles to the east. The room falls silent. Eisenhower rises and walks to the wall map. His finger traces a long route from the Enns River to Linz, nearly 80 miles through mountainous terrain. Third Army was not supposed to advance at all. They were ordered to hold at the Enns River under explicit instructions from SHEF. Instructions rooted in the agreements signed at Yalta in February, agreements between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin defining occupation zones in post-war Austria. When did he cross the Enns? Eisenhower asks. May 2nd, sir. 0400 hours. No request for authorization. Eisenhower stares at the map. The Enns River was the agreed stop line. Everything east of it was designated for Soviet occupation. The terms had been signed and delivered to Moscow. That's impossible. Eisenhower says quietly, "We have explicit agreements with the Soviets." Smith produces another document. Field Report 33782. Third Army elements secured Linz at 0600 hours this morning, May 4th. Bridges intact. The 11th Armored Division is establishing defensive positions east of the city. Eisenhower does the math instantly. 80 miles in 2 days. That's not a reconnaissance probe, he says. That's not a tactical adjustment. That's a full army advance into territory the Soviets are expecting to occupy. This was settled at Yalta. Yes, sir, Smith replies. And intelligence indicates the Soviet 6th Guards Tank Army is less than 20 miles from Linz. Eisenhower closes his eyes. American and Soviet forces are about to meet in Linz, Austria, and no one coordinated it. No one authorized it. Patton took the city on his own initiative, Smith adds carefully. He tends to interpret stop lines as flexible. Eisenhower turns sharply. Get him on the phone. Now. Smith hesitates. We've been trying, sir. Third Army Headquarters says he's at a forward command post. Communications have been difficult. Difficult? Eisenhower repeats. Yes, sir. Eisenhower sits back down. He is the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe. He answers to Washington and London, and indirectly to Moscow. And one of his most aggressive commanders has just seized a city deep inside the Soviet occupation zone without orders. Keep trying, Eisenhower says, and get me full reports on every Third Army unit forward to the Enns. I want to know exactly where Patton is and what he's doing. Smith salutes and leaves. Eisenhower looks back at the surrender documents on his desk. Germany is on the verge of unconditional surrender. The war is about to end. And George Patton has just opened a dangerous new front. Without even answering his phone, for hours pass. For hours of radio traffic, relayed messages, and repeated attempts through Third Army Headquarters. Finally, at 1,400 hours on May 4th, the connection is made. Patton is in Linz itself. George, Eisenhower says, his voice cold. What the hell are you doing in Linz? You were ordered hold at the Enns River. There is a pause. Then Patton's voice crackles over the line. The bridges were intact. The Germans were retreating east. Someone had to secure the area. The Soviets were supposed to secure that area. Eisenhower snaps. We have signed agreements. Stalin is already sending messages through General Marshall about American units operating in the Soviet zone. Well, Patton replies, unapologetic, I figure possession is 9/10 of the law. We took the city without firing a shot. And frankly, the local population is relieved to see us instead of the Red Army. Eisenhower rubs his forehead. This isn't about tactics, George. This is diplomacy. We're trying to build a post-war alliance with the Soviets, and you just drove a tank column straight through it. With respect, sir, Patton says, if we're negotiating an alliance, we should do it from a position of strength. Right now, we're in Linz. They're not. Eisenhower's voice drops. You need to understand something. President Roosevelt has been dead for 3 weeks. Truman is trying to establish credibility. The entire post-war order is being shaped right now, and you've just made my job infinitely harder. I want you to hold your current position and be prepared to withdraw if ordered. Silence. Withdraw. Patton finally says sharply, Ike, these are American positions now. My men took this ground. Your men were never authorized to be there. Eisenhower replies. Another long pause. Eisenhower can hear background voices. Radio chatter. Understood, sir, Patton says at last. Third Army will hold current positions. George, I'm serious about this. Do not. The line goes dead. Patton has hung up. Eisenhower slowly replaces the receiver. Bedell Smith stands in the doorway. How did it go, sir? He hung up on me. Eisenhower says, get me a direct line to General Marshall in Washington. Eisenhower continues, and find out everything we can about Soviet movements in that sector. If their forward units run into Patton's armor, this could turn very bad, very fast. Smith nods and leaves. Eisenhower remains alone in his office, staring at the map on the wall, at the thin lines that were supposed to prevent exactly what is now unfolding. Linz is 80 miles past the agreed stop line, and Patton is not backing down. By the morning of May 5th, the situation escalates. Soviet Marshal Fyodor Talbotkin sends an urgent communication to SHAF headquarters. Red Army units advancing west from Czechoslovakia have encountered American armored forces near Linz. Talbotkin demands immediate clarification of American positions and intentions. Under the Yalta agreements, the Soviets were to occupy Linz. Their operational maps placed the city firmly inside the Soviet zone. Now, local Austrian officials are telling Soviet commanders that American troops arrived first. The message is courteous, diplomatic, but the implication is unmistakable. Why are American forces operating in Soviet territory? Eisenhower drafted a reply himself. The language is careful, measured. He explains that Third Army pursued retreating German units across the Enns River and secured Linz to prevent disorder during the final collapse of German resistance. He assures Talbotkin that American forces will coordinate closely with Soviet command regarding final occupation boundaries. He does not mention that Patton never requested authorization. He does not mention that Third Army is fortifying positions around the city. And he certainly does not mention that Patton has no intention of withdrawing. That afternoon, the pressure intensifies. A cable arrives from Washington. General George C. Marshall. President Truman is now receiving formal protests from Soviet Ambassador Andrei Gromyko. Stalin himself has sent a message questioning American adherence to the Yalta agreements. Truman wants an immediate explanation. This is the new president's first major test of Allied coordination. Roosevelt negotiated Yalta. Roosevelt built the alliance. Truman has been in office for barely 3 weeks, and now Stalin is openly asking whether the United States intends to honor its commitments. Marshall's message is blunt. Resolve the Linz situation immediately. The president cannot afford a public confrontation with the Soviets days before Germany's surrender. Eisenhower reads the cable twice. Then he summons his staff. What's Patton's current status? He asks. An intelligence officer steps forward, unfolding a map. Sir, Third Army is elements of the 11th Armored Division in and around Linz. The 65th Infantry Division has also moved forward. Estimated American strength in the Linz sector is approximately 23,000 troops. And the Soviets? Eisenhower asks. The Red Army's 6th Guards Tank Army is 18 miles east of the city. Additional elements of the 4th Ukrainian Front are moving south. We estimate up to 80,000 Soviet troops could be within 24 hours of Linz. Eisenhower studies the map. 23,000 Americans, 80,000 Soviets, in peacetime Austria, with no clear mechanism for disengagement. What is Patton doing? Eisenhower asks. The intelligence officer hesitates. Sir, reports from 3rd Army headquarters indicate General Patton has ordered defensive fortifications constructed around key positions in Linz. He's also secured the main roads leading toward Salzburg. Defensive fortifications, Eisenhower repeats. Yes, sir. Eisenhower turns to Bedell Smith. He's digging in. It appears so, Smith replies. Get me Churchill's staff, Eisenhower says. I want London's position on this. And find out whether Truman has responded to Stalin. The staff disperses. Eisenhower remains at the map, staring at Linz. Patton is not preparing to withdraw. He is preparing to stay. And he has already made his next move. On May 6th, 3rd Army headquarters in Linz receives a delegation of Austrian city officials. They are asking for American civil affairs support. Schools must reopen. Infrastructure needs repair. Food distribution must be organized. They are not asking the Soviets. They are asking the Americans. Patton agrees. By midday, 3rd Army establishes a full military government in Linz. American civil affairs officers begin coordinating directly with Austrian administrators. The city's population, nearly 180,000 people, is now under American administration. Eisenhower learns of it that evening through an intelligence summary. He reads it twice, then sets it down slowly. He's established a military government. Eisenhower says to Smith, he's not just occupying Linz, he's administering it. Yes, sir, Smith replies. And there's more. Patton has also moved units to secure Mauthausen. Eisenhower looks up. Mauthausen, the concentration camp liberated by 3rd Army on May 5th, one of the worst the Allies have encountered. Tens of thousands of prisoners. Overwhelming evidence of mass murder. Mauthausen is 15 miles east of the Enns, Smith continues. Technically inside the Soviet zone under Yalta. Patton has positioned the 11th Armored Division to maintain control of the camp and the surrounding area. Eisenhower is silent for a long moment. If 3rd Army withdraws, the Soviets take control of the prisoners, of the camp, of the evidence. What's the Soviet response? Eisenhower finally asks. Smith produces another cable. Marshal Talbotkin has sent a second message. Soviet forces are demanding immediate American withdrawal to the Enns River line. They are calling the current situation an illegal occupation of Soviet territory. Illegal occupation. Eisenhower repeats quietly. Yes, sir. Eisenhower walks to the window. Outside, Reims is calm, almost peaceful. The war is nearly over. Germany is on the verge of surrender, and Eisenhower's 3rd Army commander is locked in a standoff with the Red Army over Austria. Any incidents? Eisenhower asks. 2, comes the reply. Soviet reconnaissance patrols have made contact with American positions. No shots fired, but tensions are high. Both sides are observing each other closely. Eisenhower turns to Bedell Smith. Draft a withdrawal order. 3rd Army is to pull back to the Enns River within 48 hours. I'll sign it tomorrow after I speak with General Marshall. Smith nods. Yes, sir. And notify General Patton. Eisenhower adds, I'm flying to Austria. I'll deliver the order personally. What Eisenhower does not yet know is that Patton has already issued instructions that will make any withdrawal nearly impossible. That same evening, May 6, Patton gathers the senior commanders at 3rd Army Headquarters in Linz. Present are Major General Charles Kilburn of 11th Armored Division and Major General Stanley Reinhardt of the 65th Infantry Division. Patton spreads a map across the table. "Gentlemen," he says, "we're staying in Linz." Kilburn glances at Reinhardt. "Sir, SHEF hasn't authorized." "I don't care what SHEF has or hasn't authorized." Patton cuts in. "We took this ground. We're holding it. If the Soviets want it, they can ask politely." "The Soviets have substantial forces moving into the area." Reinhardt says carefully, "If they press the issue, then that's their problem." Patton replies, "Not ours. We have excellent defensive terrain between here and Berlin. We have the local population on our side. And we have Mauthausen. Those prisoners are not going under Soviet administration. Not while I'm in command." Kilburn nods slowly. "Understood, sir. What are your orders?" "Fortify every key position. Establish defensive lines on all roads leading into Linz from the east. Coordinate with civil affairs. Integrate the local population." Reinhardt hesitates. "Sir, Eisenhower is going to order us to withdraw." Patton looks at him evenly. "Withdrawing an army takes time. Logistics alone could take a week. A lot can happen in a week." The commanders exchange glances. They understand. Patton is buying time. "One more thing," Patton says. "No incidents with Soviet forces. If their patrols approach, be polite. Be professional. But don't move." "Understood." "Yes, sir," both men reply. Dismissed. After they leave, Patton's intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, steps forward. "General," Koch says quietly, "this is going to create a crisis at the highest levels." "I know," Patton replies. "That's the point." He looks back at the map, at Linz, at the Soviet formations to the east, at the thin line marking the Yalta boundary. "We spent 4 years defeating Germany," Patton says. "And now we're going to hand half of Europe to the Soviets. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, all of it. And nobody in Washington or London seems to understand what that means." General Eisenhower understands the political reality, Koch says carefully. "Eisenhower is a politician," Patton replies. "He has to be. I don't. My job is to win. And right now, winning means holding Linz." Koch remains silent. "They'll order me to withdraw," Patton continues. "But until they do, we stay. And maybe, just maybe, someone in Washington will wake up and realize what we're giving away." He walks to the window and looks out over Linz, the Austrian city that, on paper, is not supposed to be under American control. "Get some sleep, Oscar," Patton says. "Tomorrow is going to be interesting." The next day, everything changes. May 7th, 1945. Germany surrenders unconditionally. At 0241 hours in Reims, General Alfred Jodl signs the instrument of surrender. Eisenhower witnesses it. So does Marshal Georgy Zhukov, representing the Soviet Union. The Third Reich is finished. And suddenly, Linz is no longer a tactical problem during active combat. It is a political crisis. American and Soviet armies now face each other in peacetime Austria, with no clear authority on who is supposed to move. Within hours, the reports begin arriving. 11th Armored Division. Local Austrian officials request continued American Civil Affairs Administration. Schools reopening under U.S. supervision. Population expressing relief at the American presence. Soviet liaison message. American forces are legally occupying Soviet-designated territory. Immediate withdrawal to the Enns River is demanded in accordance with Yalta agreements. 3rd Army Headquarters. Military government established in Linz. City population, approximately 180,000, now under American administration. Civil order maintained. Intelligence summary. Soviet Marshal Konyev is moving forth Ukrainian front units toward Linz. estimated 80,000 Soviet troops could reach the area within 24 hours. Reconnaissance patrols increasing contact with American positions. Eisenhower reads each report in his office. The war is over. Germany has surrendered, and one of his army commanders is occupying Soviet-designated territory without authorization. Then a cable arrives from Washington, this one from President Truman himself. The Soviet Union has fulfilled its obligations under the Yalta agreements. The United States is expected to do the same. Resolve the Austria situation immediately. Stalin is questioning our commitment to Allied unity. Another cable follows. This one from Winston Churchill. Marked private and personal. Patton may be insubordinate, but he has secured a position of real strategic value. The Austrian population clearly prefers American administration to Soviet control. I recommend holding Linz and negotiating from strength. I cannot state this publicly. The decision rests with you and President Truman. Eisenhower sets both cables down on his desk. Churchill privately supported Patton, but he could not say so. Truman needed the crisis resolved before Stalin could conclude that America could not control its own generals. General Marshall's cables were urgent. This had to be settled before it escalated into a public confrontation. Reports were reaching the press. Stalin was already framing this as a test of Truman's credibility. Eisenhower calls his staff together. "What's Patton's current status?" he asks, for the third time in 3 days. "Sir, Third Army maintains positions in and around Linz. General Patton is at his forward headquarters in the city. Soviet forces are 12 miles east, holding position. Any incidents?" Eisenhower presses. 3 encounters between Soviet and American patrols. No shots fired. Both sides dug in, observing each other. Eisenhower leans back. "We're 12 hours from an armed standoff with our own allies. Someone find me a solution that doesn't involve withdrawing or opening fire." Nobody has an answer. That evening, Eisenhower boards AC 47 transport at 0600 hours, May 9th. He is flying to Austria, direct to Patton's headquarters to resolve this face-to-face. But Del Smith accompanies him. So does General Omar Bradley, Patton's immediate superior as commander of the 12th Army Group. Bradley has remained quiet throughout the crisis, but he knows Patton, and he knows this confrontation is inevitable. They land at a forward airstrip outside Linz. Patton is waiting, in full uniform, 2 pearl-handled revolvers at his belt. He salutes as Eisenhower steps off the plane. "Welcome to Linz, sir," Patton says. Eisenhower returns a salute. "We need to talk, George." They walk to a command tent. Maps cover the table. Reports stacked in corners. This is Patton's forward headquarters, the place he has been running his unauthorized occupation from. "I'm ordering you to withdraw to the Enns River," Eisenhower says, voice low but firm. This comes from President Truman himself. Patton's jaw tightens. "Ike, we both know what happens if we pull out. The Soviets move in. The Austrians who welcomed us become Soviet subjects. The survivors at Mauthausen are handed to Soviet administrators. Is that what we won this war for? We won this war as allies, George. That includes the Soviets." Eisenhower says, "We won this war," Patton replies, voice rising. "And now we're handing half of Europe to Stalin on a silver platter. You know what he's doing in Poland, in Romania. You've read the intelligence reports. And now Austria, too. We just ended one war. Do you want to start another?" "I want to win the peace," Eisenhower says quietly, "not just the war." Silence fills the tent. Bradley watches both men, but Del Smith stands near the entrance. Eisenhower steps to the map and stares at it. Linz, the Enns River, the line marking the agreed American-Soviet boundary. "You're right," Eisenhower admits quietly. "Stalin is taking everything we let him take. The Austrian people would rather have us than the Red Army, and strategically Linz matters." "You're right," Patton says. "No," Eisenhower counters, turning to face him. We withdraw to the Enns in 1 week. During that week, we negotiate with the Soviets for a revised occupation line. Negotiate? Patton asks, with what leverage? With the leverage you created by occupying Linz. Eisenhower replies, now I'm going to use it. Patton falls silent. 1 week, Eisenhower repeats. I'll delay the withdrawal order for 1 week. That gives our diplomats time to negotiate with Moscow. If we can adjust the line, we do. If we can't, we withdraw. But we do it on our terms, not Stalin's. And if the Soviets refuse, then we withdraw. Because an armed confrontation with the Red Army in peacetime Austria is not an option. Patton walks to the map. He stares at the city he sees without orders, at the ground his army holds. 1 week, he says finally. 1 week. Eisenhower confirms. Patton turns to Eisenhower. Face hard, voice controlled. Ike, I hope someone understands that we're on the verge of giving away the fruits of our victory to a potentially more dangerous enemy than the one we just defeated. The words hang in the air. Eisenhower does not respond immediately. He looks at Patton, the man articulating what would become the Cold War, before anyone in Washington or London was ready to hear it. I understand, George. Eisenhower says quietly. I understand exactly what you're saying. Do you? Patton asks. Yes, Eisenhower replies. And so does Churchill. And so does half the intelligence community. But understanding isn't the same as acting. We have agreements, alliances, a president who needs to build credibility with Stalin. And we have you in Linz without authorization, creating an international incident. I created an opportunity, Patton says. You created a crisis, Eisenhower counters. But you also gave us leverage. So I'm using it. 1 week. Withdrawal to the Enns on May 15th. That's final. Patton salutes. Understood, sir. Eisenhower returns a salute and then does something unexpected. He extends his hand. Patton takes it. You were right about the Soviets, George. Eisenhower says quietly, just so you know you were right. They shake hands. Eisenhower turns and walks out of the tent. Bradley follows. Bedell Smith lingers a moment. General Patton, Smith says softly, for what it's worth, a lot of people at SHAF agree with you. Patton nods, but they can't say it. No, sir, Smith agrees and leaves. Patton stands alone in the tent, staring at the map, at Linz, at the line he crossed without orders. This was more than insubordination, more than tactical brilliance. This was Patton seeing the Soviet threat, articulating it before the Cold War had a name. His unauthorized advance into Austria was reckless. It was prescient. It was strategic foresight. Eisenhower couldn't publicly agree with Patton, but privately, he delayed the withdrawal. 6 days of negotiations followed between American and Soviet diplomats. 6 days of intense discussion over occupation zone boundaries. The final agreement adjusted the line. Not by much, but enough. Mauthausen and parts of Upper Austria remained under American administration during the critical transition. The local population avoided immediate Soviet occupation, and a precedent was set for future negotiations over boundaries across occupied Europe. Patton had given Eisenhower leverage. Eisenhower used it. The system worked, but just barely. Third Army finally withdrew from Linz on May 15, 1945. Not to the original Enns River line, but to the modified boundary negotiated during that week. The Soviets occupied Linz as planned, but the confrontation forced a formal clarification of occupation zone boundaries, preventing future incidents. The numbers tell the story. Patton's unauthorized advance covered 80 miles in 48 hours. U.S. forces in Linz at peak strength numbered 23,000. Soviet forces that would have occupied the city without opposition numbered more than 80,000. The standoff lasted 11 days. Casualties, 0, though there were several very close calls. The deeper story is what Patton saw. His diary entries from May 1945 read, like predictions of the next 45 years. Soviet expansion, the Iron Curtain, the division of Europe. He wrote about it while official Allied policy still relied on cooperation with Stalin. Eisenhower, constrained by political realities and necessity of Allied unity, could not act on that foresight. But he did not stop Patton immediately either. He delayed. He negotiated. He used the leverage Patton had created. Years later, Eisenhower reflected on Patton and Austria in his presidential memoirs. Patton's instincts about the Soviet Union were correct, even if his timing was impossible. He wanted to hold the line in Austria. Within 2 years, we were drawing lines all across Europe, trying to contain exactly what he predicted. 2 years after Linz, the Truman Doctrine would formalize American policy of Soviet containment. The Marshall Plan would rebuild Western Europe as a buffer against Soviet expansion. NATO would create a military alliance to counter the Red Army. Everything Patton warned about in May 1945 became official American policy by 1947. But in May 1945, he was alone, a general without orders, occupying a city he wasn't authorized to take, facing down an ally that would become an enemy. In December 1945, 7 months after the Linz incident, Patton was involved in a car accident in Germany. He died from his injuries on December 21st. To his death, he believed the wrong enemy had won the peace. The Cold War that followed proved him more right than wrong. Austria, the country he seized without orders, became one of the few neutral zones where East and West could meet on equal terms, in part because of the precedent set in those chaotic 11 days in May 1945. The confrontation at Linz forced both sides to negotiate, to clarify boundaries, to establish protocols for occupation. Patton's last diary entry, written December 9, 1945, 12 days before his death, reads simply, "We defeated the wrong enemy." History would spend the next half-century debating whether he was right. This has been a story of what Eisenhower faced when Patton secretly crossed into Austria without orders. A story of insubordination and foresight, of tactical brilliance and strategic vision, of a general who saw the future and tried to change it.